Washington, former campaign aide Rick Gates has agreed to plead guilty, becoming the third associate of President Donald Trump to make a deal with special counsel Robert Mueller, a source familiar with the proceedings told NBC News. Gates, who was indicted with former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort in October on conspiracy and other charges related to their lobbying work in Ukraine, is expected to appear in federal court in Washington on Friday to enter the plea. The development comes a day after Mueller filed a new 32-count indictment against Gates and Manafort, hitting them with new charges of tax and bank fraud. It also follows a guilty plea by a Russia-linked lawyer who admitted he lied to investigators about his contacts with Gates. Both pleaded not guilty, but in recent weeks there were signs that Gates had flipped and agreed to provide evidence to the investigation. His original attorneys asked to quit, citing irreconcilable differences. Gates would follow Mike Flynn, Trump's short-tenured national security advisor, and former campaign advisor George Papadopoulos in pleading guilty to charges filed by Mueller, who is investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election and possible ties to the Trump operation. Trump has called the investigation a witch hunt and insists there was no collusion between his campaign and the Russians. The charges against Gates and Manafort are not related to campaign work. Instead, the indictment says, they laundered tens of millions of dollars in lobbying payments through a web of U.S. companies and banks. Mueller, meanwhile, ratcheted up the pressure on Manafort, revealing in a filing last week that his team has amassed evidence of moral-edged crimes, including doctored financial documents used to obtain a $9 million mortgage. The Russia probe, which Mueller took over in May, began yielding fruit in October when Papadopoulos secretly pleaded guilty to lying to federal agents about his contacts with Kremlin-connected Russians, communications that Manafort was allegedly aware of. Manafort and Gates were indicted soon after. And then in December, Flynn pleaded guilty to a charge of making false statements to the FBI about his communications with Russia after the election but before the inauguration, allegedly made at the urging of Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and Flynn's former deputy, Katie McFarland. Then, last week, Mueller unveiled the first charges directly tied to Russian meddling in the election indictments against 13 Russian nationals accused of conducting information warfare through social media accounts that drummed up support for Trump and criticized Hillary Clinton. Earlier this week, Alex van der Zwaan, a former attorney for the blue-chip firm Skadden Arps who is the son-in-law of a Russian oligarch, pleaded guilty to lying to Mueller's team about his contacts with Gates. In recent weeks, Mueller has also interviewed key figures, including former chief White House strategist Steve Bannon, Attorney General Jeff Sessions and fired FBI Director James Comey. It's still not clear if Trump will submit to questioning by Mueller. Andrea Mitchell reported from Washington, and Tracy Connor from New York.